Good morning, everyone, and we welcome you to our Saturday morning Bible study. Today is March 17th, 2018. We are recording from the Plainfield Christian Science Church Independent, Plainfield, New Jersey, the United States of America. And this morning, our moderator is Colleen from Massachusetts.
Good morning. I'd like to read the opening statement from The People's Idea of God by Mary Baker Eddy, page 6 and 7. Quote, God is no longer a mystery to the Christian scientist, but a divine principle, understood in part because the grand realities of life and truth are found destroying sin, sickness, and death. And it should no longer be deemed treason to understand God when the Scriptures enjoin us to, quote, acquaint now thyself with him, God, and be at peace, end quote. We should understand something of that great good for which we are to leave all else. Quote, chisel in hand stood a sculptor boy, with his marble block before him, and his face lit up with a smile of joy as an angel dream passed o'er him. He carved the dream on the shapeless stone with many a sharp incision. With heaven's own light the sculptor shone. He had caught the angel vision. Quote, sculptors of life are we, as we stand with our lives uncarved before us, waiting the hour when at God's command our life dream passes o'er us. If we carve it then on the yielding stone with many a sharp incision, its heavenly beauty shall be our own, our lives, that angel vision, end quote.
Beautiful, thank you.
Yeah, that was a beautiful selection. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I just would like to give gratitude. Linda found the first half of the opening statement, which is beautiful, and it tied it all together.
Thank you, Linda. And something really to think about. We all are carving ourselves out. And what is our model? Is it the angel vision? Beautiful thought. Thank you.
I love the part that it talks about it's a divine principle. And I think that's the wonderful thing about these Bible studies, too, is it's based on principles and how you practice these principles rather than just thinking of just talking about ideas or getting caught off in the human mind and theories. We're talking about principles, and I think that defines us even with New Age, because this is principles, a principle.
Thank you so much. Our next Liberator, Love is the Liberator topic will be Christian Science versus New Age, because there is a difference, and we must make sure that we keep Christian Science pure of New Age and of other
wannabes.
Yeah, that's a good way, wannabes.
I like her use of treason. It should no longer be deemed treason to understand God.
Well, exactly. Thank you. Because the human mind would call it treason, wouldn't it? Call it everything under the sun to actually know God or know something of God.
Hey, Tom?
Yeah, I just wanted to say interesting behavior I've seen just from observation. But for the Boston organization, when it comes to medicine, it tends to be, not to go that route. But then I think largely my assumption, because they don't pay much attention to the Bible, they focus on the healing aspect and look at it as an alternative form of healing. because they're not doing the regular medical route and it's alternative form of healing. So then they start seeing how they align with other alternative forms of healing. You'll see that here and there where they talk about that sort of in a favorable way. It kind of leads to something I read recently where there was a lecturer from the Boston Church who did an interview with someone who's in alternative medicine, but the interviewer was a certified hypnotist. And I just boggles my mind. I don't know how they can spend an hour being interviewed by a certified hypnotist, Anyway, so that's
Thank you.
my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I know Linda has a story to tell, too. I'm not sure. Do you think, would you like to mention it here, Linda, or tomorrow?
Well, it actually probably fits in perfectly with this Bible study since Malachi is addressing this idea of the synagogue. Yeah, the preacher's not teaching this people the correct idea of God. And recently I was looking at an association preparation paper for the Boston. It was my old association. And in it, the speaker, they go on about all his intellectual background, and I'm sure he has some interesting things to offer, but in the preparation where they usually tell you your assignment, it was all reading the teacher's old articles. There was nothing biblical, nothing referring to any of Mrs. Eddy's writings. And I have listened to some of the lectures he's given, and I think it's this fine line, this subtle line we cross when we start blending into the Buddhism and all the New Age and the hypnotism. Like Tom said, it's very subtle, and unless you're paying attention, you're going down the byway, and that's exactly what they were doing in Malachi, is this blending and this subtle taking into the thoughts. And if you don't understand animal magnetism or how to handle it or what it is and its operation, you're not prepared to defend yourself, and you will just drift away into the thought that's there, and it becomes less pure. And Mrs. Eddy's very clear about this.
Thank you so much, both of those. Thank you, Tom and Linda. It's so important. It's happening. It's taking you down a path. And also, it's people that are ignorant of the textbook and the Bible. So if you don't know what it is, you'll just listen to whatever anyone tells you, because you don't know the bona fide object. You'll fall for the counterfeit.
About 5 years ago, when I got the bound volumes from our church, finally, I didn't want the most modern ones, and one of the local churches wanted some of those, so I was very happy to donate them. So I took them down on a Wednesday evening, and much to my shock and horror, they did not read from the Bible. They did not read from Science and Health. They read 100% of the reading was from the Message. Whatever the heck that is. It's not even a Bible. In the front of it, it doesn't even talk of it as being a Bible or a commentary, so I'm not sure what it is. So then, finally, my testimony, I got up and marveled at the fact that what were they reading from the Message for? What was the history of the person who wrote it? What was their healing ability? And then you have Mary Baker Eddy, who healed on the principle of praise Jesus, and they had excluded her out of her own meeting. And after I got done with that, I certainly was like a leper. And they sure walked around me with a big burst. So it's not just gradual, then the ultimate is that it's totally, completely excluded from Christian Science Church.
Wow. Thank you, Mike. That's amazing. I've heard a lot, but I keep hearing more. Something else. Oh, my gosh. You know, that's why, and Mrs. Eddy says when readers read from Science and Health in the Bible, they're to read from the book, not from any papers. She didn't want it polluted, diluted, adulterated,
or
mistaken. Take my books, read it from the books. She was very clear on that. Oh my gosh, it's unbelievable. And yet those churches, those aren't excommunicated. That's perfectly fine. You can do that. Good night. I am familiar with that book, The Message. It's a very modern version of the Bible. And I don't know who wrote it or how it was interpreted. But not to even have any readings from Science and Health. And that's why, too, we stay with the King James Version, tried and true.
This is so sad, but thank God for Plainfield.
Well, it's becoming more and more apparent, I must admit, even to those of us here. Oh, it is very sad. You're right, Jen. Very sad.
Well, that's why we write our own lessons. We started that many years ago. That's why we publish our own magazine. Because what's published out of Boston is drivel. It's not even science. You know.
And it's mixed with all this other type of thought that they're blending with. Hypnotism, Oriental mysticism, etc.
But when you think of the books of the Bible, they were written by people who were inspired. They were written by people who saw to some degree a divine principle. And they recognized that as something worth preserving. That's why they wrote it down. And that's why the people who maintained the Bible throughout history risked their lives to keep it, risked their lives to translate it into a language that people could actually read and understand. And yet, the human mind called it treason. The human mind attacked anyone who would try to preserve it. And so
the human mind is always trying to get more things. I mean, the human mind is always looking for something else new, or a shiny new object or whatever.
That's because it's totally stupid.
We're never satisfied.
It doesn't know anything, so.
Right, and it can't know anything.
And it's at enmity with the things of God, which would be the Bible, the spiritual interpretation of it, Science and Health. It's at enmity, and it will continue. It always has, it always will, so I guess we shouldn't be surprised. But it is sad to see how deeply the organization has been infiltrated and taken over with just that, the human mind. And you're right, Linda, this is the topic to talk about. So wonderful, and I thank you, Colleen, for writing these questions and picking up on these important points that are very easy just to skip over.
If I could just interject, I used to attend the Mother Church and then also a branch church here in Massachusetts, and I really would struggle to find some value out of the lessons, and I always just thought it was me. And when I would go to church, I would just be worried that I was going to fall asleep, and it would be hard for me to get through a whole lesson without my mind wandering. And at this church, I love the lesson. I learn so much. It's every line is just packed full of ideas, and I read it a lot, and it's very inspiring. And I listen to it on the audio, and it's great. It's like it wakes me up. It's so the opposite. So I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you.
That is wonderful. Thank you. And so, what's the difference? Because I get it. Oh well, it's all the same. It's all Bible and Science and Health. So, what's the difference?
Well, they write a passage from the Bible, and then they do the correlative with Mary Baker Eddy's Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures. But it's got the words, but it lacks spiritual meaning. It'll be about the topic, but it doesn't have spiritual depth. the spiritual sense that we have here.
Why do you think that is?
I think they're just following the letter, and it's so therefore the letter is dead without the spirit.
That's it.
It makes all the difference, doesn't it? The thought behind the writer, the thought behind the publisher, or the thought behind whoever puts it together. You feel the thought, don't you? When you look at a painting, you feel the thought of the painter.
They can be using all the same the easel, all the beautiful colors, but the thought is behind it, and so it is in this. That's why the readers. It's so important that the readers we have in our church are living the science to the best of their ability, and certainly those that write the lessons. And Mrs. Eddy says this is, well, she called it the most important work there is to do, is the writing of these lessons, and they have to have the inspiration behind it. Otherwise, this is how the veil gets cast over it, and why no one understands it anymore. It's what's behind it. So these are very important points. And people will say, oh, I don't really care about all this. This is all political. I don't care. I just want my healing. Well, honey, you got to know a little more than just your healing, because I get that too. And if you don't understand some of the basics here, if you just want a healing, if that's all you want, then just go to the doctors. There's a way and a reason that science heals, and you need to have the understanding of it. And that sometimes takes a little bit.
That was part of Malachi's message.
It is, and we will get into it, and it's wonderful. So, anyone else on this?
I'll mention this quickly, and then we'll move on. I also noticed with the Mother Church, I say the Mother Church, but it's the organization, the BOD, they're very much more focused on the healings of certain things to get that demonstration, and they put that in their writings, like in their publications. And if you're living the truth, the healing will come. But the focus is not really on healing the counterfeit. To me, and I'm learning that here. It's about living this science, and it's a huge difference. There's a shift in thought.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's wonderful. You see it so clearly. And she was attending the Mother Church in Boston.
Yeah.
She said also the music was disturbing to her. The singing.
It was. Yeah. It was absolutely. I would have to say, out of a Disney movie. It was absolutely beautiful, but yet it was almost untouchable. The music here is rich, and it's beautiful, and it's so meaningful. All of the hymns, but the singers that you have at the church services, every song is awesome.
That's the beauty of the soul, because we're not, especially the ones here, are not accomplished singers. Faith and John and some of our organists are accomplished, but those of us here singing are not accomplished. So thank you. Go ahead, Florence.
And I think, when the focus is so much on just the healing, then the other part, an important part, which Mrs. Eddy talks about in her writings about the redemption from sin, that's forgotten. I never heard anyone talk about, I need to do something about this, my pride, quote unquote, or selfishness or anything like that. No, nobody touches that. And yet, at times, that could be just what is, delaying whatever healing you're wanting.
You're absolutely right. And that is we're going to get into that with the burden of the word of the Lord. Because that's right. That's what the healing is about, that, and people don't want to hear it. And I honestly feel, and I felt this for a long time, Mrs. Evans, she raised the dead many times. She healed last stages of cancer. She did incredible healing. All of those people, I don't know where they are, what happened to them. And my healings, she had been my practitioner. They did not come so quickly overnight. I had to work for them. But at the time, I almost thought God, of course, wouldn't do this, because God does not withhold any good from us. But I felt like God was saying, okay, guys, you've had all your instantaneous healings. Now you're going to work for them, okay? So shut up and sit down. And I mean that. I did. I meant it for myself. Because look at it. You get your healing, zippity-zip, and you go back to your vomit, the Bible says. You have not learned one little tiny thing. You just go back to your old ways. So what the heck good is it? When you earn your healing, when, as Colleen said, your life changes, transformation, it's what this lesson is all about, the chemicalization that goes on, then you've grown. You're up a higher place. It's a magnificent thing. It's something to be desired, but my goodness do I hear, I've been being treated for 2 weeks and I'm still not well. What's the matter? I don't really care. What have you done for God in the past 2 weeks? Seriously. The time that whining stop. Do something for God, for goodness sakes, and then maybe we'll talk. But if you're not willing, then do just go to the hospital. Go to the doctors. Get your quick fix. That's not Christian Science healing, and we shouldn't be so impressed by it. If things had been different, if the world had been revolutionized and the millennium had come in, then maybe all these instantaneous healings would be worth something. Right?
Yeah. But without the understanding, what are we doing?
What are we doing?
Something that she sacrificed. I mean, she did so much to give to the world. I mean.
Yes.
Exactly.
I'd like to add, in the 400 years between Malachi and Matthew, they said there was this period, and the Bible Concordance I was looking at, or study, said that, all the study of the Scripture, all seeking of God and preparing for the Messiah, was not put to good use. Instead, they became blinded and deafened so that they could not even recognize the Christ when he came.
Wow.
And I thought that was fit in right to what you were saying.
Very much so. Now, does that mean we don't get healings? It does not mean that. You hear the healings we have, but these are the transformations, the real healings. They're earned, they're worked for, and they do come. But as someone, I think it was Colleen too, it's the byproduct of seeking God with your whole soul, heart, might, all that's within you. Then they come, and that's how they should come. And I thank God that that's how they come. The other doesn't mean 2 cents to me anymore. It doesn't.
Wasn't it Mr. Kimball that said if he had been healed instantaneously, he would not have been able to do the works that he wound up doing?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, not just him either. Some will agree with some of the, yeah.
Myself, Florence, all of us.
Uh-huh.
And that's what when we go on, too, about shall sit as a refiner's fire, purifying. In order to help others, you have to go through that process. And you can't unless you've been through it. So, very few. I don't know of anybody who's been able to. Maybe some, but that's a superficial, and that's what we get to in these priests in Malachi, who weren't helping anybody because they had not been purified. They haven't been transformed. It's all superficial. And so the word and everything gets more and more superficial and watered down.
Just wanted to read from the Church Manual, which covers the thing about the difference between the Mother Church, the CSBOD lessons in Plainfield. It's no incorrect literature on page 43. A member of this church shall neither buy, sell, nor circulate Christian Science literature which is not correct in its statement of the divine principle and rules and the demonstration of Christian Science. Also, the spirit in which the writer has written his literature shall be definitely considered. His writings must show strict adherence to the golden rule, or his literature shall not be adjudged Christian Science. Departure from the spirit or letter of this bylaw involves schisms in our church and the possible loss for a time of Christian Science.
She saw it, didn't
Thank
she?
you, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
And so here they're focusing, on all this unauthorized literature, which happens to be the pure good stuff by people who were taught by Mrs. Eddy, for heaven's sakes. And they're saying, oh, no, don't read that. And then they're letting you read all this tripe. So what's that all about? Thank you, Mike.
The human mind.
Yes, it
Exactly.
is.
No wonder the foundation is crumbling.
Yes, right. Absolutely, Janet. It's very symbolic.
It has to, because there is no foundation for it yet.
But something that Matthew Henry wrote about Malachi for chapter 2, he wrote, "The priest's lips should not keep knowledge from his people, but keep it for them." And I was just thinking that was a good difference between what Boston does and what here does.
Exactly. All this precious literature. And that's partly why people just eat up our website. All these things they've never read before, they just... And why not? I did too. Who would want to withhold that from anybody? Goodness. Okay, well, we've covered all the questions. Go ahead, Colleen.
Okay, so today's topic is God's messenger. The additional Bible readings were from Malachi and Deuteronomy. Question number 1, who is Malachi?
Well, they didn't actually talk. They actually didn't have much about who this person was or anything about them. The thing that I found was that they talked about his name meaning my messenger or my angel, and one source talked about that it might have been an angel incarnate or possibly Ezra. But I kind of like my angel the best. The angel thought.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's not that much known about him humanly, right? Where he came from, or how long he lived, or who his parents were. But he left the...
I read that was written about 430 B.C. after the return from the Babylonian captivity.
It says maybe a contemporary of Nehemiah. Is that right?
Right, they said, and maybe he took over when Nehemiah had left the city for several years. It was 1,000 years after Abraham, and he was one of the last of the 3 prophets to be included in the era of prophets. Any more about the history, Linda?
No, I didn't have anything extra, but I think he was warning of the foe in ambush.
Yes, and it made a point. They had rebuilt the temple, and yet the temple meant nothing, right? So that's why temples just have churches. Unfortunately, it's still true. You can have the temple. They spent a lot of time doing that, and yet they were not living the science, the truth. They were not living it. So the temple meant nothing. All kinds of things were going on that shouldn't have been at that point, where disobedience to God, backsliding, the priests leading people astray, as Linda said earlier.
Yeah, neglecting the temple, not honoring God, and not tithing. I thought that was even giving back to church, and marrying pagans, which to me is, like we were talking, mixing and blending thought.
Yes, mixing and blending thought, marrying the pagans. So all this was going on, and what were they? They were complaining to God, right? They were complaining. Here we go again. Wine. Why is this? Why aren't we free like we once were? Why don't we live the way we did when King David and Solomon? Why? Complain. And so they were pointing the finger at who? Who were they mad at?
God.
God.
God, of course.
God. That is a bad thing to do, my friend. Don't ever go there. If you think you're mad at God, you're really mixed up. And so the finger was pointed back where? To them. Please, because I hear it, that it's a false theology that you're mad at God because someone you love died, or you've been sick, or you lost some money, or whatever, so it must be God's fault.
Or you've prayed and prayed and prayed, and He hasn't answered.
Hasn't answered me. I heard that recently, yep. I know people that pray and their prayers aren't answered. How much time have you devoted to this? Go ahead, Colin. Whoever.
No, it wasn't me. I don't know.
Who? Dale. Dale?
Well, there was a time in Mrs. Eddy's time when the practitioners in Chicago were not healing, and they had been great healers, and nobody knew what was going on, so they sent a delegation to visit with Mrs. Eddy to ask her what they could do. And she just told them that they needed to love her more. And that thought came to me when I was thinking about these people and these priests. They needed to love God more.
Absolutely, yes. We had a roundtable on that Keystone article. A very important point. And when they began to love her more, the healing began to take place again. So, if you're ever tempted to blame God about anything, you point that finger right back to yourself.
With it one finger out and three fingers back.
And I don't care what the situation is or how good you think you've been. Never, ever blame God for anything.
Or Christian Science at that.
Or Christian Science.
Right. When I've been in that situation where I've prayed and prayed and prayed, it's all about what I want, not what God wants.
Thank you.
That's honest.
There's something going on there that needs shaking up, and God has the answer. But if you blame Him, that's just the ploy of the devil, because then you're totally helpless. You don't even have God to help you because you're blaming Him. So that's the devil talking to you. The devil wants you to blame God. Then he goes, ha, 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 ha. I've got you in my hands now. You're going to have to worship me because you certainly aren't worshiping God. Please, if you ever attempted to do that, it shows you are royally screwed up. And get yourself turned around. Get some help. Do whatever. Scream, yell, shout. But never blame God. God is your Savior. He loves you. He has the answer. And He always has, and He always will.
I got to say, for me, coming here and learning about the 7 synonyms really made that point come home, because, truth would not have an agenda against me.
Yes.
Love does not have hate in store. So,
yes, thank you.
I realized how stupid I was.
The divine mind doesn't want to make you stupid.
Yeah, that's
right.
But this is what, why so many people are anti-God and anti-church and anti-prayer. But honestly, they don't know what they're talking about. With all due respect, they don't know what they're talking about.
No, they're anti the false concept.
Yes, they're anti the false concept. So,
yes.
But they think God is a man up in the sky.
Some do. Well, did we answer who is Malachi?
I just wanted to add one thing. As had been said, Malachi means messenger, or in Strong's prophet. But then it comes from a word which I looked up, and I thought this was fascinating. Silk is drawn from a cocoon, and I thought that was just rather fascinating, because silk is supposedly stronger than the same size piece of steel drawn out. And it's just an incredible substance, I guess one would say.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I go on to question number 2?
Sure.
Okay, question number 2. What does, quote, the burden of the word of the Lord to Israel by Malachi, end quote, mean? What is this message and what is the concern?
I thought that was a fascinating question. Did anyone find anything on it?
I looked up the definition of burden. I don't know if anyone would be from the Webster's Dictionary, 1828.
Okay.
That which is borne or carried, a load. That which is borne with labor or difficulty. That which is grievous, wearisome, or oppressive.
Something I read said that it was a great weight of importance, sometimes too heavy for some to bear.
Thank you.
But I think it is a burden if you want to, keep doing the wrong that you're doing and therefore resisting what is straightening you out, then it's a burden. The truth that Malachi was saying from God.
Yes.
Now, Charles Spurgeon gave a sermon on it, and he said, those that spoke as if it were the burden of the word of the Lord realized how serious and important it was for everyone, as opposed to those who were in high offices and spoke and did it casually and allowed the people to have a very lax system of right and wrong.
Thank you. That's what I found. Spurgeon wrote a whole sermon on this, and he's bringing out the tremendous, maybe it was Shardy's definition of burden, but how a responsibility, it's God's responsibility, but it's very tremendous that those who are speaking God's word, well, he lists things. He says, first, it's no light thing. He says, second, you've got to be living it. You have to have undergone that purifying process. And then he said what we talked about earlier, you have to be willing to rebuke sin. The pride, the human intellect, you've got to be willing. All of these can be considered a burden. It's not always joyful to have to be rebuking people. Rebuking an error might seem to be directed at a person, but it's always an error. And then he said one of the burdens is that you're speaking your soul out, and nobody's listening. Nobody's hearing you. No one remembers what you said last week because they haven't been using it. It just zips over their heads. Sometimes you're subject to ridicule because people will think, well, who the heck is he or she to be saying that? Or he or she pronounced words wrong, or her hair was sticking up funny, or... And then he says, and the greatest burden of all is those that don't receive the gospel at all. Maybe you haven't reached them. But it should be that I think the point is, because Jesus said, what did Jesus say about his burden?
It was light.
It was light.
Yep.
And that's what Florence was addressing in a way. We shouldn't be going around dragging our feet and, oh, so wearisome. When God is doing it, the burden is light, but we must take it with the utmost seriousness and a great privilege and honor to be doing this work, because if you don't, you will have what we see in the organization and what we see going on at this time, in the time of Malachi, because the priests were what, Linda?
Well, they were teaching the people incorrectly.
Yes.
I love what you said about the casual lax sense of, and of religion. That's huge. That's what I find. It's just so casual now.
The other word that comes to mind is also whatever happens to be expedient or easy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Easy way, the easy road out. Mrs. Evans.
And then they profane the Word of God. They twist the words to justify themselves.
And they made polluted offerings to the Lord's altar. He offered polluted bread upon mine altar.
And then you have all these people being taught in the wrong way, and the weakening of the Word, which is what we see. Mrs. Evans used to talk about, she grew up in New York in the church there and the big Sunday school, but she said the practitioners, they were in it full time. They had offices in those days, and they went to the office. They stayed at the office all day. They saw people. We didn't have internet, and maybe the phone wasn't used as much, but it was a solemn job, and it concerned her so when she saw these practitioners who, were more interested in their tennis games and, all the other things that they had to do, and it was like being in the practice was just a little part-time amusement for them. I mean, that's not how it is here. We know it's 24/7, and that's how we were trained, 24/7. It's nothing you drop and forget about. It's always there. And if you call it a burden, I don't know. Sometimes it can seem when you get a lot of people whining, but no, generally it's a great joy. It's a great joy, right, Florence?
Well, you see, if you're not enjoying this, then you're not really doing it. So
not doing
there's a joy in it, yes.
And as I've told you, you are all practitioners. You are all working. Maybe you aren't listed yet, but you are in that process, because once you know this truth, you are working in your own life, and you should be working to help others, and you're getting taught every week. So something we're all doing, and we all need to realize and take it very seriously and with great solemnitude.
When you think about it, God is thinking of us 24/7, so we should be reflecting that back.
Absolutely.
Right. That's why it's a life lived. It's not a quick fix here and there.
Another thought on the word burden is that you can't not do it.
Thank you. That's a great one. You can't not do it. That's really good. Because that's how it is. You can't not do it. Thank you, Betty. That's a good description.
Malachi was sent, wasn't he? The messenger. He had a message to deliver. It may have been largely rebuke, which may have seemed like a burdensome thing, humanly. Has anybody else ever felt burdened by the need to rebuke someone? Has anybody failed to rebuke someone because they thought it would be a huge burden?
Used to.
Yeah.
But then
but not anymore.
Yeah, it gets where you can't do it.
And you suffer for not doing it.
You suffer for not doing it. That's it. You can't not do it. That's it. And that is the kind of priest you want helping you. Someone who's at that point. Anyone else who can put it down or put it on or fake it, then that's not it. You have to be at that point. It's just who and what you are. You can't not do it. You have all these messages from God in you. You've got to do it. And you will suffer if you don't, for your disobedience.
So the calendar statement today says, you give, you get.
Right? Very true.
Receiving and giving and receiving go together.
Yes, yes. Can't always just be at the end where you just want to receive all the time. You might start out the first few minutes that way, but it won't last for very long. Got to start giving back. Can't reach that happy little plateau where you just sit and receive. It won't work.
Okay.
So that was a very good question, one I'd never thought about. Anyone else want to?
I just felt that he did have the burden of, correcting, bringing their sins to the surface and confronting them with it. But also he, said you have to lift off this burden and you'll be lit. You'll be saved. I mean, I think he had an uplifting message also.
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, yes, he did. And all the prophets did, although it might not have sounded uplifting to the ears that heard it. But
yeah.
It's like what Florence said. You have to have that joy within you or you can't do it. You're in the human mind when you become overwhelmed and depressed by the picture. Whatever you're dealing with, remember, it's always a mesmerism, including this picture, including the picture we see today in our world. It's not the truth, a mesmerism. It needs wakening up, enlightenment. Okay, anybody else?
Yeah.
Jeffrey.
If Jesus said, my yoke is easy, my burden is light, I think that's what it says on the wall upstairs in the church. Then I don't think I'm going to get too much more than I can handle.
Thank you.
I don't think he's going to give me more work than I can handle.
Very good point. Thank you very much.
That's correct.
You never get more than what you can handle. So if you've got something, don't think you can't handle it. If it's come to you, you can. Through God. God doesn't give you more than what you can do. Thank you.
And that maybe we forget that God works with us, it says. God worketh.
Mm-hmm.
So we work.
Right.
Yes, in you and through you.
And if the thought ever comes, gee, I don't think I can handle this, remember that with God, all things are possible. And what is impossible to men is possible to God. Jesus had to answer his own disciples with it.
I think this is a good perspective to have anyway, because I don't think you're going to get a lot of people coming to the church if you just say, oh, it's so hard.
Not a good drawing card. Very true. Thank you.
But truly, where are they going to go? I mean, where are you going to run to? Yeah.
So this is the most joyous work in the world. It brings you great peace and great joy.
There was one other thing about this burden on verse 17, chapter 2, when Malachi says, you burden the Lord when you say to everyone that's doing evil, oh, you are good in the eyes of God. And obviously they got into this state because they didn't have a clear distinction of good and evil, but they got very lax about it, started justifying evil, even calling it good.
Thank you, Bruce.
Yes.
That's what happens today, too.
It does. Thank you. What a mess that is.
And as the next question goes into, this was their inheritance. So they weren't treating that very well.
And this is what our watch was on Thursday about what are we teaching our children, that wrong is right. That's a burden, and then you've got to undo all that. Well, where does all that start? And what are you as a parent or as a friend or as a Sunday school teacher or whatever you are? Where are you in all this? Are you teaching the things that are going to make the next generation happy and peaceful and fulfilled? Or are you just teaching them a bunch of mishmash garbage that they're going to have to spend the rest of their lives trying to work out of? Mrs. Eddy says that in Science and Health.
Right.
How many? Oh, sorry.
If we are preparing people to meet, deal with evil, they're going to get mesmerized by it and shloomed by it.
And remember, it's never too late. The truth has all power. We give its evil the power we think it has. So if you have a loved one that you think is beyond help, that's just never true. Ms. Shardy said in her testimony, and I love it, and it was from last week's lesson, that maybe this person doesn't see Christ, but what?
Christ sees them.
Thank you. Christ sees him. Can't hide. Maybe they're not at the point where they're seeing it, but Christ is watching them. Christ sees them. Christ loves them. Get out of the way. Let Christ work. Okay, where are we now?
Okay. Question number 3. What is the covenant of Levi, and how has it been corrupted? I did do a little bit about this. Should I read what I found of the covenant of Levi?
Sure, unless someone else wants to do first.
Okay.
That's fine. Go ahead, Colleen.
All right. The Lord appointed the tribe of Levi bear the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark was hewed of wood, and it contained the 2 tables that Moses had written for the second time, the 10 Commandments. The tribe of Levi gave proof of their holy fear of God and their reverence for his name when they appeared so bravely against the worshippers of the golden calf. They were made the messengers of the Lord of hosts, messengers of the covenant of life and peace. At the end of every 7 years, at the Feast of Tabernacles, all the people were to gather together that they may hear, learn, and fear the Lord God, and observe and do all the words of the law. Malachi was delivering this message to them.
Where did you read this?
I think I might have gotten this. I did some research on Biblios.com, also the Amplified version of the Bible, and Matthew Henry, and I did not write in parentheses where I got this, so it's one of those 3, but I can let you know.
Well, that's okay. I mean, you should always, reference.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so that we know where it comes from.
I may have put it in my own words. I'm not sure if it was exactly word for word.
Okay.
Basically, the idea.
And in the chapter it says, my covenant on my part with Levi was to give him life and peace, because on his part of his part was reverent and worshipful fear with me. But then the law of the truth was in Levi's mouth, and unrighteousness was not found in his lips. He walked with me in peace and uprightness, and turned many away from iniquity. But then it goes on that covenant was not kept. And as we've talked about many times, a covenant is something you make with God. God promises you peace and joy if you give the covenant of obedience to him. But this covenant was not kept, was it?
Well, and as background, Levi was the tribe that the priests were supposed to come from.
Yes.
So it was ordained, if you will, by God, by Moses, by God, to be the source of the priests. And while all the other tribes were farmers and hunters and stuff, they contributed, they tithed to the church to support the Levites. And they were to keep their faithfulness, to keep their purity, and that was their job. And the covenant was, God's covenant was, if you faithfully follow me and obey me and revere me, I will take care of you. In essence, that was the covenant. And the priests at the time of Malachi were not doing that. They were not faithful. They were not obedient. They were feeding trash to the people who came to the synagogue.
Anyone else on that? So, you've all been taught here to make your covenant with God, and I trust you have and that you're keeping it. It helps keep you on the straight and narrow if you remember this.
There is something very significant about this church, that this is individual with each one, and everyone is here because we love God and mankind, and we're not depending on a church or church officers or someone else to bring out our salvation. We see this as our duty and love for God and man.
Thank you very much, Dan. That's what makes it so unique, and that's what makes it so vibrant. You're all doing this individually.
And that is what Mrs. Eddy established in the man, isn't it?
Yes.
The 3 daily duties.
And that's why we have them. I had someone recently who had never heard of them. So we have them everywhere to remind you to work with them. They are treatment for yourself, for your day, and they cover everything. And they're called daily for a reason, and they're called duty for a reason. They're not called once in a while thoughts. They're called daily duty.
And Mrs. Eddy does refer to God as individual, doesn't she, in some of her writing? Yeah. Because God is individual. And what that means to me is that he has an individual relationship with everyone. Each one of us has an individual relationship with God, given to us by God. And it's the most precious, the most valuable thing we have.
I think if you really cultivate that understanding, it's comforting to know that you're never alone.
Yeah. Very comforting.
Yep. That's why Malachi finished in question number 6.
Yes, right.
With his statement.
Shall I read question number 4?
Yes.
Okay. How does Malachi bridge the Old Testament and the New Testament together?
So, we've mentioned, someone's mentioned before, how different things have already happened. They went to Babylon, came back from Babylon, the temple was rebuilt. So, they had lost their 2 kingdoms, and so they kind of look forward to the kingdom being restored, So basically Malachi is looking forward. I mean, you can look at the last question we have here, about the Messiah. Looking forward to John the Baptist, who was kind of going to introduce the Messiah, so to speak, So it's, I think that's how it's bridging that gap or time period, between the Old Testament and the New Testament. Malachi was looking forward to the New Testament times.
Thank you.
And he prophesied the coming of Jesus.
But go ahead.
He says he's coming, and he's gonna show you what you need to do.
Well, because he says, "Shall the Son of Righteousness arise with healing in his wings?"
Yes.
I was just looking here in the 4th chapter, and on verse 4, it says, "Remember ye the law of Moses, my servant, which I commanded unto him in Horeb for all Israel with the statutes and judgments." And then it goes on to say, "I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord." So it's like you need to remember the law of Moses, but we will send you, and we're talking about the Son of Righteousness and prophesying the Messiah. So you have to remember both, that letter and the spirit.
Okay.
Yeah, beginning of chapter 3. "Behold, I will send my messenger, and he shall prepare the way before me, and the Lord, whom ye seek, shall suddenly come to his temple, even the messenger of the covenant, whom ye delight in. Behold, he shall come, saith the Lord of hosts."
That passage also, I think, referred to my messenger as John the Baptist and the messenger of the covenant as Jesus. That's what I read anyway. Sorry, I had a bunch of dogs barking and I had to let them out.
Okay, thank you, Liz. That's good. That's a good answer.
John the Baptist.
Yes.
I'm very grateful for this study because I had no idea what the book of Malachi was about, and the idea that the blame was put upon the priesthood to be teaching properly, and that was actually one of the Christ Jesus' big doctrines was the priesthood and the Pharisees and the Sadducees not teaching the Word of God correctly and doing it for their own self-enrichment.
Thank you, Mike. I think that it does encapsulate it.
Yeah, and isn't it relevant to throughout history? You look at the roots of every religious movement. It all starts out well, and then human mind comes in. People with selfish motives take over.
And, it was interesting because with Mrs. Evans, she said she learned everything that she knew about Christian Science, not from her Boston-trained teacher. She said she learned one thing from her, and that was intellectuality is the bane of Christian Science. That was all she learned from her teacher. She learned everything about Christian Science from who, do you think?
Mrs. Eddy.
Mrs. Ritchie.
Her practitioner.
Yeah, no, you're right. Mrs. Eddy is the right answer too, but
in terms of people that she associated with,
it was her practitioner who was a healer. She was a healer. Her name was Nana Ritchie, and Mrs. Evans said that over and over again. And I can say the same thing. Everything I learned was from a practitioner who was a healer. Healing is proof that you understand the science. And that's how it gets passed down. That's the idea of apprenticeship. And it's important, and Mrs. Eddy has said it's important to have an example of how to live it. Mrs. Evans was a wonderful example of living it, and all of us should be too. Not some weird person that does weird things or here, there, and gone tomorrow, but something real that you can, just like the beginning beautiful poem about something, how you can sculpt yourself after.
And because she was a good practitioner, she gladly accepted the burden of rebuking pride and self-righteousness
and intellect
and selfishness and all the stuff that opposes God.
And this is the true way to keep it passed on and to keep it pure and right, so it doesn't get diluted, polluted, adulterated, all of that stuff. And this is why local churches are good. And it used to be every church had to have a practitioner. I say local independent churches. Without a practitioner, you shouldn't have a church. And it's only to teach it, to pass it on, not for them to do everything while everyone else just sits around on their haunches. So, a great Bible study, Colleen.
We got through question number 4.
We did, and perhaps we'll touch on those others tomorrow at the round table. Okay. Anyone else say anything?
Fantastic Bible studies.
It was
Just
wonderful.
fantastic.
And thank you, Tom and Linda.
Thank you.
I really appreciate your help.
Yeah, it was a great topic. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Colleen.
Thank you, Colleen.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Colleen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You all.